Cool. Thanks, Liz. Yeah, so welcome to the Drizzle 1.5 webinar. It seems that most of you have touched it a little bit, well, actually about half. But if not, that's okay. That's cool as well. Oh, I got video here, but my face is not that important for this particular webinar. But anyway, I would assume everyone has have some familiarity with Truffle and have used Truffle in the past. Yes. Is there anyone that has not used Truffle? Put it in the chat so that I can slow down a little bit if I cross any things that you might not know about. But I think that would be something that I would assume. I don't see anyone saying that they've never used Truffle, so I assume that everyone has some basic familiarity. All right, so the plan for today, it's not going to be too long or anything. I'm going to go over basically what Drizzle is, how it's organized in terms of its new monorepo, and also going through a live demo of the new event system of how to track events with Drizzle. So unfortunately, if you've never touched Drizzle at all, I'm not going to go through every little thing about how to use Drizzle, but I will point to the tutorials that do help you do that and walk you through step by step. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start. If there's any questions or anything, just put it in the chat, and I will stop and try to answer. So feel free to just drop things in the chat if I'm going too fast, or is there anything that, if there's anything you don't understand. All right. So I actually don't have slides at all. I wanted this to be more like a practical introduction to the whole thing, Drizzle. So this is all a facade, actually. There's one slide. I created it 3 minutes ago. So here we go. Getting started with Drizzle. So if you don't know what Drizzle is, you can go to Truffle Suite, github.com/trufflesuite/drizzle to see the actual code. I think for developers who are more comfortable with looking at code, this is where I would personally start. Obviously, you go to trufflesuite.com for the official documentation and tutorials as well, right? We can go and actually look at the different components we have here. So with Drizzle, Drizzle itself was originally created about 2 years ago by Josh Quintal, who isn't here today, I don't think. But basically, it was created as a Redux store so that people can read data and write data to the blockchain while doing the front-end stuff, because Redux at the time and still now quite a standard for state management on front-end solutions, particularly with React apps, right? And so in terms of using Drizzle, there is some kind of presumed familiarity with Redux, but the benefit of that is that Redux is such a ubiquitous thing that's used all over the front-end world these days. It's very easy to find resources to learn what Redux is. Now, if you've never used Redux and you don't know what that is, basically it's a global store of the state of your app. And you can send actions to it, and then it'll change its state. It's like one place where you can put all your state, so you don't have to worry about having state in different components, for example. So Drizzle keeps that state updated with the blockchain so that you can kind of like reactively get updates from it. So if you have a number on the blockchain in your smart contract, and you want to basically make sure that your dApp keeps showing the most updated number, then, well, you just subscribe to that particular variable inside the slice of the state inside the Redux store, and it would always be like the most updated number. Right. So just a quick explanation of the 4 packages we have here. So Drizzle is now a monorepo, which is basically a repository that has several packages within it, and it's inside this packages folder here. And the description of what these 4 things are, these 4 packages are in the overview as well. The store, like I said, is the state manager, the Redux store itself. There is also the React plugin. That's the provider so that actually allows the Redux store to plug into your React app. And then, of course, there are React components that we provide, so it helps you get started really quickly. And there's also a Vue plugin that Amal has created to do a very similar thing, but for the Vue.js ecosystem. All right. So going forward, I'm going to go to the tutorial, getting started with Drizzle and React. This tutorial is a little bit dated, actually, but all in all, things still work, with one exception I'll mention a little bit later. But instead of going through the entire tutorial, I'm just going to hit on the most important things, right? So in terms of this particular tutorial, we're going to take possibly one of the most simplest smart contracts there is, right? As you can see here, it's a smart contract with one variable. It's a string set to hello world, and you can set it to a different string if you want, right? So that's all it is. You're setting a string, and the string is stored on the blockchain. Right? That's the premise. Going further down through the tutorial, you'll see that we go through creating our React.js project, and wiring up the front-end client to the Truffle project itself, and installing Drizzle. So this is the part that's actually different now. Instead of npm install Drizzle, you'll see from the official GitHub README, it's actually npm install. It's just this name here, npm install @drizzle/store. I believe if you click into it, you can see how it's used here, right? If you do npm install @drizzle/store, which is up here, then you'll be able to import it like this, import Drizzle from @drizzle/store. Right? So that's the only difference. Once you have Drizzle installed with your React app, then you can wire it up. Right? To do that, we import Drizzle from, and again, this would be @drizzle/store, and then we can create a new Drizzle instance right here with the options. And the options are basically where you would put your contracts and what your Web3 provider is. So basically telling Drizzle how to connect to your smart contract on whatever blockchain you want it to connect to. In this case, as a fallback of localhost 9545, essentially. So with Drizzle, there's some initialization logic. We have to make sure that it's initialized and connected to the blockchain and ready to go. So we can there's actually part of the Drizzle state that you can get, and this is the Drizzle instance where you can get the state of the store. Part of that state is the Drizzle status, right? And it'll tell you if it's initialized or not. So that's just a convenience thing for you to know whenever you can start reading from the store and interacting with Drizzle, essentially. So let's go to the more practical part of reading that particular string, right? Remember, we're working with that very simple smart contract where we're just reading a string and then writing the string. So in this particular component, I call it the read string component. When it mounts, we want to pass in the Drizzle instance and the Drizzle state. So you might be wondering, why is there Drizzle and Drizzle state? And if you go up a little bit, it actually talks about here. Let's find that. Drizzle and Drizzle state. So Drizzle state is the actual state of the Redux store, right? And Drizzle itself, the Drizzle instance, is when you need to interact with Drizzle. So, I mean, this will be a little bit more clear once I get to the writing part, actually. Sorry, let's go back to the reading component. Where's the reading component? Right, sorry. Right, so in any case, we have a Drizzle instance and a Drizzle state, which is like the state of the contract that we want to read from. So let's go down here. Here, this is where it says Drizzle instance and Drizzle state. It explains that Drizzle state is there for you to read information from, like the contract state variables, for example, transaction status, account data, things like that. Whereas Drizzle instance is what you actually use to get stuff done with, like calling the contract methods, getting the Web3 instance, for example, right? So with the read string component, what you do is over here, when this particular component maths, we want to grab the contract instance from the Drizzle store. So the Drizzle instance dot contracts will have a bunch of contracts that refer to the contracts you passed in at the beginning of initializing Drizzle inside the Drizzle options. So you have the contract instance, and basically you just call a method on it. So the myString variable is a public variable, so there's actually an automatically created getter from Solidity for that. So basically contract instance dot methods dot your call method, and then instead of in normal Web3.js you would just call dot call on top of it, but here we call dot cache call because we cache that call. We're caching these calls so that we can call it for you whenever there's a new block to make sure that we're getting the latest data, right? So we actually need to call dot cache call onto the method we want to call, right? It's essentially this line is letting Drizzle know that we want to watch the myString method, right? And that's going to give you a data key, and that's something for you to reference that particular variable, right? You can save the data key to the state in this component, right, which is over here at the top. And whenever you render, you basically see if you have the variable, right? And to do that is, again, you want to get the contract instance. But instead of contract instance from Drizzle, you're getting it from Drizzle state now because you're concerned about the variable that's inside the contract. So you would go to your Drizzle state dot contracts and grab the myString store contract, right? Because that's, again, that's the contract state that you're interested in. Using the save data key, you can get the variable that we're interested in. So you can see here, myString store, that's the contract. myString is the variable we're interested in. And we use the save data key because that's basically our reference to get the actual myString value, right? And then we basically, once we have myString, we just render it. So this, if myString isn't there yet, that means we haven't gotten that value yet. So that's just a check for whether or not myString exists. But once we have that, we log out myString.value, and then this component, and you can see it's not many lines. If we take out all the spaces in the comments here, it's really just inside here is just 4 lines. The render function, it's basically just 3 lines. So it can be very simple, right? Because if you think about using Web3.js manually, for example, you're going to have to make these calls on a continual basis, and then you're going to have to save it and things like that. It may not even be the most updated value. So then you have to make that call, set like a timeout type of thing, and do your own polling. And if you have to do this for all your variables, that can be really annoying, right? So this is part of one of the benefits of having Drizzle is you can make smaller components, and you let Drizzle, which is the Redux store, just update that, and then you can just read from it. And this myString.value here is always going to be the most updated. All right. And let's go to writing the component. So that was maybe I should stop here if there are any questions. That was about using Drizzle to read a variable from the blockchain. Is there any questions so far? I think it's pretty straightforward, but let me know. I don't see anything, so sure, I'm gonna keep going then. Here we go. So write a component to write to the smart contract. So the next thing we want to do is writing to the component. So that means submitting a transaction to change that string in our smart contract, right? So instead of the read string component, we're going to make a set string component. All right, and this is the actual full component here. Maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller so you can see well. So this might be a little too small. Oh, there's something in the chat. Is a JSON file in the config, the contract ABI? It is the Truffle artifact, which also contains the contract ABI. So I believe you're referring to the Drizzle options, Carl. And then I'm just going to scroll up so that we can get to that. I think this is what you're referring to, right, Carl? This myStringStore.json here is what's output by Truffle when you compile your contracts. That's the Truffle contract artifact, which actually coincidentally includes the ABI. Yes, that's correct. It is more than just the ABI, the entire artifact generated by Truffle, and you just pass that in. The reason why we need all that is because the contract artifact, the Truffle artifact, actually gives us the address at which this is deployed as well. So we take that information so we can easily connect to it. If it's just the ABI, that doesn't tell us enough, right? So that's kind of like the benefit of using Truffle as well. It gives these artifacts that give you everything you need to work with. So let's go back to write a component. Here we go. Great. So set string. Yes. We have, let's just take a look at the render function. Very simple. We have an input, like a text box. And every time you type something in there, it gets saved to the state, I believe. Yeah. So basically what we want to do is every time someone hits enter, this is e.keycode equals 13, we want to set the value. And then setting the value to the blockchain basically goes through here. I think I see another thing in the chat. Hang on a second. Question from Carl again. What if you want to do something that programmatically determines the contract address rather than reading it from the artifact? Is it possible to override the contract address from the artifact? Yeah, you could override it. Hang on. Determines the contract artifact rather than reading from the artifact. Is it possible to override? I'm not sure if Drizzle does that at this point. It's because right now you're given a specific provider, and then I think I might have to address that question afterwards. I need to think about that for a second. But good question, Carl. I think it might be in some issue somewhere. Jennifer asks, am I expecting you guys to follow along on the computers? Is Josh still working on it? So just to answer Jennifer's question, I am not expecting you to follow along. Like I said at the beginning, I'm just running through some basic concepts about Drizzle, so that. But then this is actually also the tutorial that I recommend you to go through by yourself. So that's what that is. Is Josh still working on it? He pops in from now and here and then, but not actively, not all the time, I would say. And then, yeah, Tommy put something useful there. That's cool. Yes, get it in that. Thanks for helping out there. It's true. You can just modify the JSON artifact yourself. All right, I'll keep going for this particular part here. Writing to the blockchain, basically. All right, so every time someone hits enter, we basically run this function right here. Again, you have your Drizzle instance and your Drizzle state instance. We use, again, the contract instance here. We grab it from the Drizzle instance. We have the contract instance, and we call the set method, right? Now, instead of cache call, we're going to have to do cache send now because we want to change some state on the blockchain. So that means we need to send a transaction, right? So we do contract.methods.set, basically, .cache send. And then we send the value onto the blockchain. And we also have to tell it what account we're sending this from, right? So we grab the accounts from the Drizzle state here, Drizzle state.accounts 0, so first account. And once we do that, we immediately get back a stack ID. And this is just kind of like a reference ID where we can track the status of our transaction, right? So we save the stack ID into our component state. over here so that we can read the transaction state later on. So this is all you need to do for actually sending that particular transaction here. So if you count the lines, like 4 lines, well, 3 lines, because like saving stack ID to the state, I mean, it's already been sent, right? So, but like if you wanted to read the transaction state, then you would have to take all these lines. For getting the transaction status, because now we've sent that particular transaction to the blockchain, we want to make sure that it didn't fail and like whether it's confirmed or not, right? So that's why we save the stack ID for later reference. Getting transaction status, we again pull the transactions and transaction stack from Drizzle state. So we're looking at Drizzle state, pulling some data from it, and then basically using our stack ID, we find the transaction in our transaction stack. This gives us the transaction hash. If it doesn't exist yet, then we return null because it is asynchronous. It may not exist yet. Once we have a transactions hash, however, we can go into the transactions slice of the state, use the transaction hash to get that particular transaction object, and then basically we do this transactions dot transaction hash basically dot status, right? That gives us the status, like whether it's confirmed or it's still pending. But yeah, like that's basically it, right? And we want to make sure that like each of these components have the Drizzle instance and the Drizzle state instance as well. And of course, again, these things are all simplified further if you use the React plugin and the React component components as well. So let's actually get out of here and demo the other part that is a little bit more interesting in my opinion, which is watching events from Drizzle. But I will stop here for a little bit first to see if everyone's following along or if any questions. Cool, Amal has answered a question from Carl. Thank you, Amal. Right, you can add a contract dynamically. That's documented. That's great. All right, so the best part of using Truffle is that you get to unbox things. And unboxing is basically just taking a template project and having it all created and dumped into the folder of your choice so that you don't have to set up all these different things, right? And what we have here is there's a Drizzle box. So typically what you would do is Truffle unbox Drizzle, and then it would actually pull this particular project. And it's a Truffle project with a front-end app built in, a React app that already has actually Drizzle installed, right? As you can see here, it has the @drizzle/store, @drizzle/React component, and @drizzle/React plugin. So let's do that actually, and we can see that in action. All right. Well, I need to share my entire screen, so I will do that right now. All right, so here we are at the Drizzle webinar. I'm gonna make this a little bigger. All right, so I will do Truffle unbox Drizzle in this folder. Actually, I'm just gonna show you right now. This folder has nothing in there, nothing at all. So yes, Truffle unbox Drizzle. It's gonna take a couple minutes, so well, maybe just 1 minute actually. But yeah, it downloads the box from basically GitHub, sets it up, does npm install as well for the particular React project that's inside. Feel free to drop any more questions you have in the chat. Hopefully this part will be a little bit more interesting because it's me doing something rather than just me talking, reading from a tutorial. So what's happening in the background right now, it's actually running npm install. for all those things, like for all the Drizzle and all of Drizzle's dependencies as well, which is why it's taken a while. I think a lot of this is because of Web3.js, and yeah, kind of heavy. Well, so while it's loading, oh, okay, it's done. But I was just gonna mention with Web3.js, like a lot of things are a little bit difficult to work with sometimes. So we're actually trying to be a little bit more agnostic. Drizzle in the future may not use Web3.js. Obviously, we'll make sure the messaging is clear, but a lot of it is because we want to speed up this process of like installing and not having a really bloated build whenever you want to build a production build for your DApp, things like that. So this is done. Let's see what's actually in here, right? Let's do listing all the things here. You can see there is a bunch of folders like we saw before. It's a Truffle project. So inside the contracts folder, you will see a bunch of contracts. The complex storage.sol, migration.sol, simple storage.sol, tutorial.sol. You will see what all that is about in a quick second here. Since it's a Truffle project, let's run Truffle. Sorry, I meant Truffle Develop actually. Truffle Develop allows you to have a console where it actually loads up a test blockchain, a Ganache blockchain actually, under the hood so you can run your tests on, right? And you have this little console here and a bunch of mnemonics that gives you all these accounts to work with. And these accounts are all loaded with Ether, so you can, so it's easier for you to develop, right? So basically, you'll be able to do compile and migrate here, compile your contracts, do all those things, and migrate. That'll, of course, migrate your contracts, and of course, run your tests. You want to do tests. Highly recommend using Truffle Develop. Some of the tutorials might say to run Ganache CLI on your own. But if you can do it with Truffle Develop, I think that, like personally, I like that a little bit more. But of course, it depends on your particular use case. Truffle Develop, this console runs Ganache in the background under the hood. So, so test pass, that's fine. Let's make another terminal here, and I'm going to switch to VS Code so we can see what's in some of this code a little bit better, right? Make it bigger. So like I said before, we have these folders, contracts. We have these smart contracts that are preloaded. Right? A simple storage, as you can see, is a very simple storage contract. Migrations, these are Truffle migrations. I'm not going to go into too much of the Truffle stuff here. I just want to set this up. But we are more concerned about the app part of it, right? Because that's the actual front-end app that we need to work with. So this is a Create React app. So if you go to README, you can see it's just a basic Create React app here. And then, so we want to open the source. And I'm going to go through this in a bit. Let me just come back to the terminal here. And let's go into the app folder and run this React app, right? Let me see. All right, Simon has a question. Hi there, when I add Drizzle to my project, Web3.js is activated automatically with Ethereum.enable. Is there an option to delay this call? Not yet, but very soon. There's actually, I believe, a PR that's being worked on by, I think it's Julian Lepage. I'm not exactly sure, but we're working on it. I think it's a very common use case that we're asking for. A lot of people don't want to have that MetaMask pop up immediately when your DApp loads, right? So we're going to add in some steps so that you can handle that flow, so users don't get bombarded with MetaMask, like just because they opened your DApp URL. Anyway, hope that answered your question, Simon. Now we have the Two more things in the chat. Yes, Amal, thanks for responding. Tommy also has a question. Say I have a contract factory that launches contracts and keeps an array of their addresses. I'm able to get that array of addresses with a getter function. Do I then add those addresses dynamically for documentation links above? Amal can pitch in here, but I would think, yeah, that's probably the best way we have currently. Yeah. Anyway, back to the this particular demo of the, yep. So we go here, this is localhost 3000, the React app, and you can see everything already works, right? Everything is loaded. This particular account has 99 Ether in it. This is one of the test accounts. Simple storage is basically what we saw before here in the code. If you look at contract, simple storage, right here, there's a string, and we can set it. So for example, we can try to set it right here. Oh, this particular thing is a number here. That's fine. So submit. Now it's 12. That's what that is. Tutorial token. It's kind of like we use ERC20 token. You can send tokens from one address to another. Complex storage, basically showing that we can store more than just one string. We can store two strings and a struct of more strings. Let's see here. See something happening in the chat. Oh, yes. Thanks, Amal, for answering Tommy's question. Right, so this is just a basic Drizzle app, right? And we can go into the Drizzle code here, starting, of course, with any React app. We start at index.js, and you can see this is where the app actually mounts. Nothing here is different from the generated code when you run create React app. Top level app component is here. This is where we actually do the Drizzle stuff, right, basically. We use the React plugin to get the Drizzle provider. We just pass in Drizzle options, and Drizzle options, for convenience, we put it into a separate file here, but we can open that as well. With the Drizzle options, you can see I'm using a custom provider, so it's always going to try to go connect to the localhost 8545. This is for the sake of ease of development, right? Like you've seen, I was able to unbox and immediately start the React app, and it just works. We also pass in these three contracts, and we want to identify the events that we might be interested in. So store to set. And also we have a polling interval here. So there are a bunch of other options as well. You can see the documentation for that. Going back to the top level app component here, Drizzle provider is where we put in Drizzle options, and Drizzle provider is going to do all that initialization of the Drizzle store for you. And then in your app component tree, you can use a loading container, which is one of the components we provide, to make it easier to have that flow where it shows that it's loading, it's not initialized yet, and then once it's connected, it's initialized. And you can see further here. Might as well talk about the other parts of the Drizzle plugin system. With the Drizzle React plugin, we can have Drizzle Connect, very similar to Redux Connect, basically. That's a React Redux, I believe. It allows you to connect your component with a bunch of the state slices in your Redux store, right? So that's what that is. So this component wouldn't have to do much Redux stuff at all, because Drizzle Connect will help connect all the data from the Redux store, the Drizzle Redux store, into your component here, right? And specifically, it's connecting the contract instance, the contract state from simple storage and tutorial token, and of course also the account data and Drizzle status. Right? This is my component. It was the actual component that holds all of these things in this particular page here. So in my component.js, you'll see that we import these components from @drizzle/React components. And over here, you can see we don't actually need to do anything special. It's just a regular React component, and we just dump it in, right? This is account data that tells you what the active account is. It gives you the account data. So in the particular page here, you can see here, active account, gives you the address and also the number of ether inside. And so that's what this does, right? Very convenient one-liner, so you don't have to write any of that. Same with simple storage. This here, contract data, will of course give you the data of the contract, right? Which contract? The simple storage contract. And which method are we getting this data from? The stored data method, right? So we have that here. Stored value 12, right? That's what that gives us. So that's good for reading. So, and for writing, we have contract form. So that generates that particular text box that we have, basically, and we tell it what method to do, right? Set. Right? So same here, that generates this. So that's why we're able to set different numbers, and it sets it and it updates reactively, as you can see. Cool. Right, so yeah, definitely poke around some of these React components. But let's get started with the event watching portion of this. Any questions so far? No? Okay. Oh, here we are. Oh, thank you. Nicole says, great content so far. Are there plans to support React hooks? Actually, hooks are in the, I think there's a bunch of React components that are in there. I'm not sure if we've documented it yet, because at the time when we merged, it was quite experimental. So definitely something that we want to revisit, especially because a lot of the lifecycle hooks that were, not hooks, lifecycle methods are getting deprecated soon. So to answer Alan's question, yes, we do have plans to support it. Obviously, it'd be better if we have more support from the community to make PRs and changes and make that happen. So, and we're going to try to do some messaging to encourage people to do that as well. But yes, we have plans to support React hooks. I should disable my notifications. Sorry, I can't. Oh, I can't do it now. Anyway, so with Tommy, using a dynamic contract, what would I put in contract data? Contract. I believe you would put in the specific name of your contract. Yeah, thanks, Amal, right there. Yep. All right, so with contract events, sorry, Amal wrote a really good tutorial here. It's got it was published a few months ago, and basically it walks you through setting up Drizzle to watch contract events, right? And the biggest difference here is to realize that we're creating a middleware for the Redux store that is Drizzle. And in order to do that, it means we need to insert our middleware into the Drizzle store so we can intercept these events, right? So what I'm going to do over here is, let's see here, going back here in the Drizzle provider, we're going to pass in our particular store, okay? And in terms of where we're going to get this store, right? Well, we need to create the store. And we do that with the help of actually generate store. So you can see here, we can import generate store and event actions. But since we want to create this, we probably don't want to pollute this particular file too much. We're going to create a new file. I'm just going to call it like create store. All right. Again, when we import it, it's at Drizzle /store rather than just Drizzle. Oh, oops. Tell me if this is too small to read, by the way. All right. Cool. Once we have that, we want to return, basically. And I'll copy and paste this here, but I will talk about what it is in a second. right, we want to generate the store and then pass it and export it so that we can use it in our app.js, right? In our app.js, we're gonna import store from create store. And of course, that's gonna break our app for now because we don't really have all the things here yet, right? Generate store takes in a bunch of Drizzle options, which we're gonna import as well. All right, and we want to not disable Redux Dev Tools because we want to use that, and of course, we need to put in our app middleware. So this is going to be important. Oh, hang on a second. Yes. So app middlewares is going to be an array of middlewares, right? So this over here, contract event notifier is going to be our middleware. Let me just comment this out, or I might even delete it so that we can see very clearly what's going on here. So right now, I hope everyone's on the same page, right? We wanted to create a new kind of store because we need to inject our middleware, right? So to do that, we go to another file for organization's sake. We use generate store that we pull from @drizzle/store. And from there, we pass in a bunch of things like the Drizzle options and also whatever middlewares that we want to intercept or inject into our Redux store, right? And this is the custom middleware that we're writing right now. If you're not familiar with what a middleware is, it's just something that will listen to events on the Redux store. So if there's an action that's been dispatched, we want to be able to respond to that action and do something else with it, right? So this is what that is. So the contract event notifier middleware is actually a query function. So it just takes in three things, basically. The store, next, an action. But you don't have to worry about this too much because we don't actually use the store here either. Because the most important thing is listening to the action and calling next afterwards, right? So if you just look at this here, in our middleware, we intercept any actions where the type is event fired, right? And the event actions constant is pulled from @drizzle/store as well, because we want to basically check whether the type has the exact same event, right? So this, or whether it's the exact same action, right? So if the action is of type event fired, then we want to, for example, let's say console log out the particular event, right? And once that's done, then we just call next, and then it'll on the action, and then that'll just propagate through, so it'll do other things that it's supposed to do. Okay, so let me over here. So in Amal's tutorial, he actually uses a toast so that you get a very nice pop-up type of thing. In our simplified walkthrough here, we're just going to use console.log. So it's going to, right. So walking through this here, action.name is going to refer to the contract. Action.event is the contract event itself. And then action.event.return values _message is the message from that particular event, right? So this is just building a string that we can log out, essentially. We save it, and this should work from my testing previously. All right, so let's try submitting something. Oh, it works, great. This might be a bit small. Let me see if I can make this bigger. So every time I update the simple storage value here, 1, 2, 3, 4, for example, I submit, you see a new event has popped up. And this is simple storage set, data stored successfully. That's exactly what's happening here, right? At the contract name, you got the contract event name, and you have the message that's actually from the contract itself. And for reference, we can take a look at that particular contract again. See, data stored successfully. is the message that's passed through to the event. The event emitted is storage set, and the contract is storage, simple storage. If we go back here, you can see simple storage, storage set, data stored successfully. So every time I write in something, I'm going to get another one of those. It's the same every time. So like Google Chrome is batching these. So you can see it says there's 3 of those. If I do it again, it's like 4 of those now. So that's pretty much it. It's actually surprisingly simple once you consider the fact that all we did from regular Drizzle is this one file here. And actually, like, you don't even need to do all this. This is just like all these lines, right? We can literally just, if you really just want to like log out the particular actions, event, you can just log out like that, right? And that'll give you something as well. See what that gives us. All right. There's a bunch of warnings here, by the way. It's because we're still using lifecycle methods in our class components, but that's why we're gonna try to see if we can do this with hooks later on, as our friend mentioned here. So as you can see, now that instead of making that like fancy string, I'm logging out the entire action. It has the event object in itself as well, and this is where all this data is from. So you can do with this whatever you'd like. So in conclusion, to be able to get events and listen to events on Drizzle, you only really need, like, if you don't count the imports, I guess that's like 7 lines, right? I mean, this one doesn't really count either. So anyway, that's about it in terms of what I wanted to talk about. So I guess from here we can just take questions. Oh, and just a reminder, right? If you want to get more familiar with Drizzle, do go to the Drizzle, Getting Started with Drizzle and React, which I wrote over a year ago. I will need to update it actually very soon. And also this one here, Drizzle and Contract Events, written by Amal. So these 2 will probably walk you through everything I tried to talk about today. I apologize if I sometimes drone a little bit and my tone of voice a little bit monotone, but hopefully, this was worthwhile. And I think there's a bunch of comments. Let me just read this.